Back from our Bob. We just found out that Ivan is alive. Wolf on the run. I scramble over to Ivan and gives me a look that says, "You're the best, Bob." "I thought you were a goner," I say, licking some banana goo off his chin. "Me too." Ivan seems a little dazed. His eyelashes are white with dust. "What happened anyway?" "Tornado." "Ruby okay? Kenyani? Julia? George?" "Haven't seen Julia or George yet. Kenyani's over there, carrying on." A paramedic holding a box of medical equipment approaches us nervously. "I've got this," calls a woman I recognize as one of the park veterinarians. The paramedic looks happy to step aside. The vet gently but firmly pushes me out of the way. "I'll be back," I tell Ivan. I run to Kenyani. "He's good, totally good." The look of joy in her eyes makes me want to give her an affectionate nose nudge. Almost. From there, I join Ruby and Maya. "I was so scared, Bob," Ruby whispers. "Me too," I admit. "Me too, but he's fine, I promise." We watch a pair of otters dart past, chased by a guy with a net. One of the firefighters who'd been clearing debris yells, "We're clear here. No sign of other victims." Sarah closes her eyes and I can smell her relieved tears, while Maya listens to her walkie-talkie trying to take stock of the damage of the park. Officer Williams' police radio hisses and crackles with new problems, new flooding, new dire predictions. "Copy that," she says into her radio. Even with the chaos and noise, I'm close enough to the radio to catch the tiny sound of frantic barking. "We've got a unit reporting the animal shelter down the street's flooding," Officer Williams says. "Also, we've got trailer park damage on 12th Street, an oak down at Nelson Avenue blocking traffic, and a big rig overturned near the fairgrounds. And that's just for starters." Out of the corner of my eye, I notice something airborne. It's graceful and bold, like a huge wingless bird. The crowd gasps. It's Kimu. He lands on the hood of Officer Williams' squad car. His eyes are glazed, his coat wet and shimmering. "We've got a 1091 here," Officer Williams whispers into her receiver. "Confirmed. Seems there's a wolf on top of my vehicle." Slowly, she reaches for the pistol on her hip. "Please advise." The chapter's called Shots Fired. Several officers raise their guns. The tranquilizer guy takes aim too. "No!" Maya yells. "No guns!" Kimu blinks, eyes darting right and left, then leaps off the car with such grace and speed it's like he owns the wind. 2 shots ring out. Silence follows. "Was he hit?" someone asks. Maya closes her eyes. "I sure hope not." "I sure hope so," someone else says. Jungle. As I watched that leap, watched Kimu fly, I didn't know what to think. Part of me was like, "Go for it, dude." And the other part of me was thinking, it's a jungle out there. A situation. Officer William climbs onto the picnic table. Someone hands her a megaphone so she can be heard over the din. "Folks," she yells, "listen up. We've got a handful of animal control workers coming over, but several roads are already flooded out, and the weather guys are saying Gus is going to take his sweet time. Meantime, park supervisors, call in more help, but only if your workers can get here safely." The unmistakable roar of a big cat rolls over us like slow thunder. Like a lion or a tiger roar. "Any more trank guns?" Officer Williams asks the park director who's just arrived. "3 in reserve," she answers. "Nets? We have a dozen." "Okay then," Officer Williams' radio crackles. I can hear more shouting, more barking dogs. "Shelter's flooding," she says. "Yeah, that's happened there before," the director says. "Usually just a foot or 2 of water." "Okay, public safety is where we start." Officer Williams wipes rain from her forehead. "We need to get the word out that these animals are on the loose." "Of course," says the director. "We have protocols in place, but we need to be careful how we word this. People might overreact, might..." "Ma'am?" a firefighter interrupts. "I see a python in my backyard. I'm sure as heck gonna overreact." Yeah. Saw one of these crazy wild animals. Really wild animals. "First things first," says Officer Williams. "Triage is the main office. Check wreckage for any survivors, human or animal. Fan out with trank guns. Get an inventory on how many animals are loose." I wonder how it's possible that Officer Williams can seem so composed. The air reeks with fear. From the animals, birds, people, from me. And yet she doesn't seem worried about herself. Just other people. Weird. The way some humans stick their necks out for others. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Again, the crackle, the hiss, the barking. My ears perk up for a minute. Was that a familiar voice? Maybe someone I know is in the slammer. I'm going to the shelter at the elementary school, Sarah says. Her hands are trembling, but her voice is firm. To look for George and Julia, just in case. She strokes my head, and I'm happy to let her. I wonder if I should tag along with her, see if I can help out, now that I know that Ivan and Ruby are safe. Hiss, crackle, meow, bark. I hear it again. My ears go on alert. My body goes rigid. No. It's impossible. Never. Some barks you never forget. One place. I know what I have to do. Despite the turmoil all around me, the noises, the smells, the fears, the confused humans, the frantic animals, despite my worry about Julia and George, I know there's one place I need to be. A split second. I want to tell Ivan and Ruby, but Ivan is still being poked at by the rhymes with pet threat. Although, come to think of it, she doesn't seem like much of a threat. In a movie, she'd be one of the good guys. To my annoyance, Sarah picks me up. I hate being picked up. Unless it's my idea, then it's totally cool. Maya, she says, you let me know. First sign of George and Julia, okay? Promise, says Maya, and she places her hand on Sarah's shoulder. Humans, always with the touching, although I kind of get it under the circumstances. You can't take Bob to the school shelter. They're not allowing any more pets, Maya points out, and the animal shelter is flooding, it sounds like. Why don't you leave him here? I'll put him in my office. He'll be safe. No way is that on my agenda. Sarah nods. Good idea. She starts to hand me over, but hesitates when she realizes Maya still has a meerkat wrapped around her neck. It's just a split second, but a split second is all it takes to escape when you're Bob, untamed and undaunted. On my way. Bob! Sarah cries. Grab that dog, Maya yells. I spent a good part of my life running from a certain guy named Mac, and I still have my moves. I twist and spin and dip, and before you can say, yes, sirree, Bob, they're giving up. I backtrack, slip under a bench, and make my way to Ruby. Ruby, I whisper, I gotta go. Something important's come up. You and Ivan, see if you can find George and Julia. I want to come, Ruby says, stomping her right front foot in a huge puddle. You need to keep an eye on Ivan, I say. Make sure Kenyani doesn't drive him loco with her sobbing. I'll be back before you know it. I don't wait for an answer. I'm off into the wilds, into the world filled with wind and rain, with wolves and alligators, with a voice that could rip my heart in two. So he heard a bark, and he's saying he'll never forget this bark. So whose bark is this? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. Take a look at this picture. Oh my gosh. Part 3. Looking. Ivan used to ask me what I did when I wasn't hanging out at the Exit Big Top Mom video arcade. I wasn't like the rest of the animals, caged and trapped. I told him I was out scrounging for food, and he never questioned it. When you think about it, though, where's a better place to find food than the floor of a mall at the end of the day? Yeah, I wasn't looking for food. I was looking for her. For Boss. Do you remember who Boss is? I believe Boss was the sister who would boss everybody around, right? Oh, it's going to be way too hard to find that exact part. I don't know if I can find it real quick. Oh! Okay, here we go. It says this. So I went back to his siblings, okay? My brother first was the firstborn, then Runt was my youngest bro. Dot had a little spot on her back, and Yip was always complaining. I was Rowdy, and that left my oldest sister. We all call her Boss. Boss was small but mean with a distinctive, sharp-sounding bark. She could outmaneuver any of us to the best spot for dining. I admired her grit, even if she did get on my nerves. When we got a bit older, less blind, more cocky, I fought her off occasionally, but mostly Boss won. She was fearless, that pup. What if? At first, I didn't admit it to myself. You know how it is when you wish for something so bad you're afraid to say it out loud because what if it never happens? It was like that. I knew the odds were crazy long. I knew I was nuts. And yet, I went out day after day searching for her. 6. There had been 6 of us in the litter, so why was I only looking for her? Because it was her bark I'd heard. After the box landed, even after the truck roared past, I heard it. A whimper, bark, howl, cry, something I've never heard since. She'd survived, at least at first. I survived. The rest of them didn't. Oh, so when the litter, when the puppies all got thrown out of the truck, only, it looks like 2 of them, only him and Boss had survived. Relieved. And what did I do? When I heard that bark, did I run toward it? Did I try to find her to save her? No. I was just a few weeks old, helpless, useless. The cries stopped almost as soon as they'd started, and you know what? Part of me was relieved. I didn't want to have to go back onto that highway. I couldn't bear wanting to rescue her and not knowing how. I didn't want to see her die, but mostly, I was afraid. Coward. I was afraid. A coward. There's a certain freedom that comes with owning your faults. This keeps coming up. This idea of him being a coward, of him being scared, of him being selfish. The wind. Every day I went looking for Boss, up and down that same barren stretch of highway. Sometimes I'd catch a hint of something hopeful on the air and think it was my sister's scent. I'd be certain the breeze had brought me her voice, like an invisible gift. The wind can really mess with your head. Enough. After a while, I stopped going to the highway, stopped looking. It was a relief to give up. I had enough to worry about. My paddles. As I run from the park, I keep hearing my sister's yelp in my head. Still, with every step, my doubts grew. Sometimes we hear what we want to hear. The animal shelter is close, just down the street. But there's nothing quick about the trip. Water rushes past like a raging river. The sun's been swallowed by black clouds. I pick my way through muddy front yards, avoiding the worst of the water. I ain't much of a swimmer. Doesn't come up much in my line of work, though I do a passable dog paddle. Problem is my paddles. My paws are tiny, not much to work with when you're fighting a flood. I see a couple humans with flashlights, carving tunnels in the sheeting rain. But mostly the street seems eerily abandoned, especially after the chaos of the park. Shelter is at the bottom of a slight hill. Rain's pooled outside the front door despite a pile of sodden sandbags. Police car is out front, parked at an odd angle. I find some footing on a large rock near the door. Takes me 3 slippery tries, but I manage to leap onto a topmost sandbag. I bark with all I've got. But I might as well be voiceless between the wind and the rain and the howling animals begging for escape. Inside. I pause to listen. I hear humans shouting and I can make out what sounds like police radio chatter. But I don't hear Boss. I'm right here, right at the source, nothing. It wasn't her bark I heard. She's dead and I'm crazy and hearing things and drenched and shivering and where's Julia, where's George? Hey, little guy. The door eases open just a crack. Every bone in my body, every smart part of my doggy brain says, run. This is an animal shelter. A flooding one, apparently. My sister isn't here, and I still have to find George and Julia. The door moves. Swoop! The loop comes down around my neck so fast that for a moment, I don't know what it is. It's like a cowboy's lasso, the kind in old Western movies I used to watch with Ivan. But this lasso is at the end of a long metal handle, and at the end of the long metal handle is a man. Stay calm, buddy. The man eases me gently but firmly off the sandbags and through the door. I'm inside the Bow Wow Big House. The Hound Pound, the Pet Pokey. Oops. I'm going to stop right there. That's a good part. He is now. We're in the middle of like the hurricane storm that included a tornado. He heard the bark over the walkie-talkie from the police officer that the shelter was having issues, so he ran down to the animal shelter, and now he has been nabbed at the animal shelter.